have a condition called synesthesia. Where I see sounds, I see them.
There's a fly in my room, and I'm trying to record audio. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can. What is up, guys? Media Review Mike here. If you cast your minds back to 2 years ago, you'll remember that I made a video where I reviewed the popular Plants vs. Zombies creepypasta called Deadplants.exe. The video isn't very good. Oh my god, bro. But neither is the story, so it balances out. That video subsequently did quite well, so I followed it up with a review of its sequel/remake written by the incomparable Neon Plant Chris, and now, 2 years later, the cycle has been completed with the release of Vibingleaf's Deadplants remake and the video you're watching right now. I didn't find out about this remake until about 2 weeks after it came out, because the Deadplants.exe creepypasta fandom isn't exactly one I find myself keeping up with. However, once I saw it, I knew I had to talk about it. So, to kick off the new year with a bang, I'll be returning to my roots, pun partially intended, with some more creepypasta reviews. First up on the chopping block, Deadplants.mp4. I tried recording my initial reactions, but my stupid editing software that I stupid hate didn't record it, and I'm no phony, so I'm not gonna just re-record it and pretend like it's my first time watching it. That would be dishonest. Deadplants.mp4 is without a doubt the best interpretation of a Deadplants video I've ever seen. But that isn't saying very much. The video opens with a guy named Nick, who is our presenter, giving some context for the video that we're about to watch. That being a showcase of a hacked Plants vs. Zombies game that he found online. He kicks off the video by apologizing for his breaking content, citing problems with his mental health as a result of playing that Sonic game.
You fucking...
I mean, he's obviously referencing Sonic.exe, which is not really a story I think you want to be referencing in your work, if you want it to be taken seriously by people over the age of 6 years old. Nick tells us about how he found a hack of Plants vs. Zombies on a Russian website under the file name zplants that contained an executable file called Deadplants. Not Deadplants.exe, notably. The game boots up and the music is slowed and pitched down, which is a trope that I just hate. I personally think no music at all is far more eerie than some Undertale-esque music is slowed down and reversed because it's spooky. Side tangent, have you ever noticed how the Undertale No Mercy run, when described out loud, sounds exactly like a really lame creepypasta?
I was playing Undertale and decided to kill all of the monsters instead of sparing them. Then the music slowed down and the exclamation box turned into a smile. And then I fought Sans, who is actually the most powerful monster, and then a human with my name showed up and jump scared me.
It literally reads like a man door hand hook car door post. Media review might go 5 minutes without a pointless side tangent challenge. Impossible. Something I do like about the video is that the sound balancing for the game is quite off. The music is noticeably quiet and the menu sounds are louder and more distorted. So far, it does look like a sketchy PvZ mod you'd find on a Russian website. So in that department, the cliches aside, it's quite well realized. This version of the story ditches the idea from the original that this was the first time the author had played the game, which allows room for inconsistencies to actually be pointed out and have it make sense. At this point, not much has changed. Levels hard, zombies hard, game scary. The decreased frame rate is another subtle but effective aesthetic choice to add a level of atmosphere to the otherwise quite static gameplay. The video draws attention to the gravestones and how they have real names written on, but this time they aren't celebrities or 89-year-old 3rd grade maths teachers, they're just random names that it's implied will be given some sort of significance later on. The video raises the spook factor once Nick receives Zomboss's note that has "This is the end, good luck" written in Russian, which is a weird detail considering none of the other text in the game is written in Russian. I guess Russian is just a scary language in the eyes of creepypasta fans. What is cool is that while it doesn't hold any significance to the broader story, the text does read like a poorly translated version of Zomboss's letter, albeit much shorter. I'm not 100% certain that that was intentional on the author's part, but it's a neat detail nonetheless. Nick presses continue, and then, surprising nobody, everything goes red and black and distorted, and the Zombot fight commences. Look, I'm gonna be completely transparent here, I am not a fan of this segment. It's extremely long and drawn out, and aside from some obnoxiously loud music, it doesn't have anything approximating a scary, dread-inducing atmosphere. It's literally just the regular Zombot fight, with some retextured zombie heads, but not all the zombie heads for some reason. A decently retextured Zomboss design with what's either a brain or a hat perched neatly on his head, and a black and red filter laid over the top. I've said it once and I'll say it again, red and black visuals does not a scary story make. The fight also contains intermittent glitch transitions. It's unclear whether these are part of the game, which would be weird, or if they're being added in post, which would be equally as weird. The fight goes on for about 3 minutes, and when the Zombot is finally defeated, the trophy is replaced with this weird mummified skull-looking thing. Spooky. And then my least favorite analog horror trope decides to rear its old ugly head once again. That being text on a black background giving exposition. The video's already slow pace crawls to a halt, and by this point I'm just bored and ready for the video to be over. Whoever this game was designed for, and keep in mind it's not this Nick character, it was seemingly haunted by the ghost of somebody's mother, personified by the white pea shooter thing, or at least that's what I thought when I first watched it, but apparently that isn't the case. I'll come back to that in a minute, which I find kind of funny. It reminded me a lot of Godzilla NES, except in that story, the ghost of the cartridge was actually in some way related to the narrator, being his dead girlfriend. Here it's just random. Spoilers for Godzilla NES, I guess. Apparently this person's father killed his wife's family and then his wife because of some stupid war, which isn't elaborated on. Although it should be noted that Zomboss is wearing what looks to be a Ushanka, which implies it might be something Soviet related, mayhaps a deep and insightful political commentary on the decades-long turbulent relationship between Russia and NATO. Or maybe it's just Zomboss's brain, it's hard to tell. When I finished the first draft of this script, I decided to watch Raymundo2112's analysis that I intentionally didn't watch while scripting this, to make sure my analysis was purely my own. And he mentioned at the end of his video that he spoke to Vibingleaf, the creator of this video, over Discord about the story. Here's what Vibingleaf had to say about the mother character. So essentially, the story surrounds this hacked game from a Russian website Nick had found that doesn't literally have someone's mother's spirit in it, but is instead a hack made by the rotting, zombified corpse of the person's mother to send to her child as a goodbye message, which is somehow even more stupid than her spirit possessing the game. In fact, I'd go as far as to argue it's even more stupid than Deadplants 2, where the game comes alive and kills the player without any explanation. While that idea may have been what Vibingleaf was intending, that isn't really how it comes off in the video. The mother character references how big Danina had grown in 7 years, which implies some sort of supernatural presence, but no. I guess this woman was just a really big Plants vs. Zombies fan and loved programming, because this backstory also has literally nothing to do with Plants vs. Zombies. The only parallel is that the mother is apparently a zombie herself, but that does not cut it for me. I'll elaborate further on this point during the conclusion. Let's just finish the video. The names on the gravestones are also called back to, being victims of this character's father. Nick game overs because he's trash, and then the mother gives him a second chance with some 3-peaters. The video ends with an invalid file version error message and Nick stating my exact thoughts on the situation. As I've mentioned already, this backstory sucks, and I was genuinely shocked that it somehow managed to be an even worse interpretation of the story than the previous 2 versions I've read. Hence why I specified this to be the best interpretation of a Deadplants video, because the story itself is complete trash. At least the first 2 were funny, this one doesn't even have that going for it. I don't feel like I need to explain why this story doesn't work, but I'm going to anyway. First of all, why did the mother think that this was the best way to send her child a message? Through a creepy hacked Plants vs. Zombies mod with custom art and cutscenes and music and everything? To compare it once again to Godzilla NES, as much as the ending of that story sucks and ruins the rest of the story, at least it kind of makes a little bit of sense. The protagonist's dead girlfriend saves him from the same evil spirit that trapped her in the game in the first place. The game was already haunted and she was just added to it. This game isn't haunted and exists purely to be a dramatic goodbye letter from a mother that masquerades itself, and I can't overemphasize this, as a scary PvZ ROM hack on a random sketchy website. Jeez. In 2 weeks, this video has gained over 1 million views, becoming Vibingleaf's most popular video. And I think it's pretty clear as to why. Deadplants is an example of what myself and many others like to call kid-friendly horror. Kids like horror, but they don't like scary horror, so they allow things like Herobrine and Deadplants and Poppy's Playtime to fill that void of horror that manages to be just the right amount of scary without actually traumatizing the children. I mean, it sure as hell isn't adults enjoying this kind of content. Which is why I feel that it's essentially impossible to make a scary version of a story like Deadplants. Its inherent premise isn't going to be scary to anyone who A, isn't already familiar with the source material, and B, holds any degree of emotional maturity that exceeds that of a 14-year-old. Because I'm not an armchair critic, rosé sipping twat, I would like to offer some points of advice for how I would improve this story. If you are going to religiously die on the hill that these old pastors have potential, then at least draw inspiration from solid works that we have today. PvZ is a perfect example of a Gen Z nostalgia game, so I would opt to depict this story using the genre of internet horror as opposed to analog horror. The distinction being that analog horror focuses on older forms of VHS video, whereas internet horror draws from the mid to late 2000s YouTube video aesthetics. Raymundo, who I mentioned earlier, has a great video on the subject where he explains the genre quite well, and I recommend anyone interested checks it out. So, we ditch the whole dead mother arc, switch the analog style to an internet horror style, and hone in more of the creepy nostalgic feel of playing a cracked game, maybe with a virus getting installed onto the player's computer. In writing, this wouldn't really work, but when put to screen, that would effectively tap into the shared experience most people from Generation Z can relate to, being that of obliviously playing free, sketchy versions of games we couldn't afford to buy. That premise alone is enough to do most of the heavy lifting in my opinion, and while it may not exactly be Stephen King tier, it would at least be a cool watch. Putting aside that atrocious backstory that's hardly even represented in the video anyway, the video is decent for what it is, and I don't want to make this seem like a hate campaign against Vibingleaf. That's not my intention in the slightest. I thought the video was passable, basically up until the stuff with the mother talking to the player. There it just lost me. I mean, I just couldn't take the whole thing seriously with Plants vs Zombies visuals playing in the background. So with all that said and done, I draw your attention back to the title of the video. Is Deadplants.mp4 an improvement over Deadplants.exe? I mean, yeah, I guess. At least in a vacuum. If you elect to ignore the retroactive storytelling from the author that isn't really portrayed in the video, it is an improvement. However, the core problems are still very much at play. It's trope-laden, uninspired, and realistically could afford to be at least 3 to 4 minutes shorter. If by chance Vibingleaf is watching this, I just want to say that I recognize your talent for video editing, and I hope you go on to hone and refine your skills even more. My only word of advice? Stay away from these garbage creepypastas if you want your work to appeal to a broader audience of people over the age of 12. Vibingleaf has a lot of potential as a horror content creator, so it's kind of a shame to see his talent being wasted on these terribly written creepypastas that were only ever made popular by little kids having no taste in quality. It bums me out to see the sorry state that horror is in right now online. While you've got some diamonds in the rough, it feels like it's just overwhelmed by piles and piles of crap, and it's suffocating. So I hope you guys enjoy me screaming into the void about how these stories are bad, actually, because I sure as hell have fun screaming them. I've got plans to review some other classics like Red Mist Retake, Shed 17, Sonic EXE, and other such mistakes. Mayhaps one day I'll even talk about my least favorite creepypasta that I've ever read.
But that's another story!
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to leave a like, and as always, this is Media Review Mike, signing out.